Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me in the Bettor's Box. This is ATS.io's MLB betting podcast for Monday, October 19th. I am your host, Adam Burke. I'm going to talk about the World Series here that begins on Tuesday night. Figured I'd go ahead and do the Bettor's Box here on Monday, give you a little bit of extra lead time to get my thoughts for the matchup between the Tampa Bay Rays and the Los Angeles Dodgers. As you know, we have moved Kyle Hunter from Monday to Wednesday so that he can take advantage of the totals market getting posted. We talk all the time about market entry and the importance of that. And because he gets a lot of closing line value on his totals, and because they generally come out around the time that we're scheduled to record, we decided to go ahead and move his segments from Monday to Wednesday here on ATS Radio. So you'll hear Kyle on Wednesday. Brian Blessing will join me tomorrow on Tuesday to talk NFL Week 7 and the Zozo Championship, this week's golf tournament. Thursday, Brad Powers talks college football and the NFL. Friday, my picks for Week 7 in the Circa Sports Million. This will be the second to last edition of the Bettor's Box for the season. If there is a Game 7, I'll talk about it next Monday. If there isn't, then I'll just focus on a recap of this weird 60-game season, the expanded playoffs, all the different things that we saw this year, how much of it carries over into next season. I'll talk all about that on next Monday's edition of the Bettor's Box. And after that, we'll see what we do with Mondays here on ATS Radio. Might just take the day off, might add another show. We'll figure it out in a couple of weeks' time. Updated college football power ratings posted over at ATS.io today. Spent a lot of time over the weekend adding the Big Ten, Mountain West, Pac-12, and the MAC. 127 teams now power rated in my list. Got my list of where the teams stand, got the adjustments that I made this week, and also my lines for Week 8 of the college football season posted over at ATS.io. We'll do updates of the Circa Sports Million and the Super Contest tomorrow. My Circa Million entry, 2-2 going into tonight with the Dallas Cowboys still pending. Our other entry went 4-1, and I got some things to talk about with that in that recap article. Also, over at the website this week, we'll write up a new round of sportsbook promotions. Plenty of things going on. All of these sportsbooks vying for customers, vying for clients. We'll write about those new promotions over at ATS.io throughout the course of the week. All right, so let's go ahead and talk World Series here. Rays versus Dodgers. Rays plus 160, Dodgers minus 200 at PointsBet, BetRivers, and DraftKings. As I was putting together my notes here for this morning, Rays plus 160, Dodgers minus 193 over at BetMGM. So, as always, you want to shop around for the best prices. Right now, looks like the series price pretty consistent across the board on the Rays as well as the Dodgers, but you may find better lines, give or take a few cents here or there. Again, very important, as always, to be shopping around for the best prices that are out there. When you look at this matchup, the fact of the matter is, even though we went 7 games in the ALCS and the NLCS, the two best teams from this season are meeting in the World Series. And I like the Rays all the way back in March, wound up not playing any additional futures with them with the weird 60-game season, but did talk about liking the Rays quite a bit back when we were doing the season preview shows in late February and early March before all the shit hit the fan and everything got completely changed around the world, certainly in the sports world as well. So the Rays do ultimately get there. It's a little bit of a surprising path for them with all the bullpen injuries and all the things that they had to contend with, but it speaks to the organizational strength of this team. It speaks to the quality of Kevin Cash as a manager, and just simply speaks to the fact that, look, they outfox teams. You know, that they made a lot of good deals over the season at the trade deadline. They picked up a lot of quality arms. They've developed a lot of quality arms. This is just a really, really good front office, and I wouldn't mind seeing them get rewarded for all of their hard work and all of their smart efforts from an analytics standpoint, from a player acquisition standpoint, from a player development standpoint. This is a model organization in Major League Baseball, especially when you talk about a team that just cannot compete financially with a team like the Dodgers. The Dodgers have been built for one sole purpose, and it is to win a World Series at any cost. They get Mookie Betts. They've got a bunch of high-priced talent in the lineup. In fairness to them, they have done a pretty good job drafting and developing as well. You know, guys like Corey Seager and Gavin Lux, Cody Bellinger, stuff like that. They've done a good job developing talent into quality major league talent, whether they've developed it in-house or made some trades and transactions to get some guys. This is a very smart front office as well. The difference is they have a blank checkbook that they can use, whereas the Rays really don't. But the big thing is here, again, these are the two best teams meeting in the World Series. And I think if you go back to the 2016 World Series, depending on your view of the Cleveland Indians, who probably for all intents and purposes were the best team in the American League that year because it was kind of a down year for the AL as a whole, you could make a case for Boston, I guess, but I think the Indians, with Andrew Miller and Cody Allen in the form that they were probably the best team in the AL that year. So 9 of the last 10 World Series teams, at least in my opinion, and this is kind of subjective, have been the best teams in baseball. So, maybe this just hope to get in kind of strategy isn't going to work out all that well for teams as we go forward. But even in this weird 2020 season, even with the expanded playoffs with 8 teams, I think we're still getting the 2 best teams in baseball here in this series. So we'll see how everything plays out. But, the Rays here, I think this is a really interesting angle to try and handicap here for the World Series, is that Tampa Bay in the ALCS against Astros pitching batted .209 with a .295 on base and a .407 slugging percentage. That was in the California bubble. Now they're going to Globe Life Field, where, as we know, offense generally has been pretty suppressed. So there is that for the Rays here. You do wonder about their offense and if they'll be able to keep up with a Dodgers team that just hit .256 with a .355 on base and a .456 slugging in the NLCS. The roof has been open at Globe Life Field, but we saw some offensive fireworks in that Dodgers and Braves series. It certainly plays different with the roof open than it does with the roof closed. But, you wonder about the Rays here offensively going into this series. And look, they've hit 25 home runs here in the playoffs so far to only 18 for the Dodgers. But that's really the only way that the Rays are scoring. You've got a sub 300 OBP in the last series, a sub 210 batting average, still managed to slug .407 from hitting the home runs. The Dodgers are doing things in a little bit different of a way offensively. Yeah, they've hit some big home runs in this, in these playoffs. The Will Smith home run, of course, the Cody Bellinger home run in Game 7. But they're also drawing a lot more walks than they did in the regular season. I'll talk about that more here in a little bit as well. So it is a little bit scary to me that the Dodgers are not nearly as reliant on the home run as the Rays are, given that Tampa is going now to a ballpark that really does suppress offense in a lot of ways. A lot of one and done for the Rays, a walk and a dinger, a single and a dinger, stuff like that. The Dodgers, 58 walks drawn in the playoffs here so far. That's 11 more than the Rays, and they've played 2 fewer games. The Rays were one of the top teams in the regular season in walk rate. In fact, they were 4th in walk percentage during the regular season. The Dodgers were 12th. But the Dodgers, who walked 9.8% of the time in the regular season, have walked 12.4% of the time in the playoffs. So this Dodgers offense still making a lot of hard contact, but now they've also supplemented that with some higher walk rates as well. So, LA getting a big nod offensively in this series. Now, one thing we do have to worry about is that Cody Bellinger is hurt again. He popped out his shoulder after his home run in Game 7, kind of celebrating, doing some things with the on his path back to the dugout. Did hurt his arm. The trainers did pop it back in, but you wonder what sort of additional damage was done possibly to the labrum or something like that. Kind of saw that being talked about on social media yesterday. Bellinger, of course, as we know, is also a very good outfielder. So it's not like the Dodgers want to put this guy in a DH role and just let him hit. He's also a very good defensive player. So we'll see if the Rays get any kind of advantage, if maybe they get a little bit more aggressive tagging up against that throwing shoulder, stuff like that. We'll have to kind of wait and see. One thing that I think could level the playing field a little bit here for the Rays is that they have 2 full days off before this series begins. The Dodgers were forced to come back from being down 3-1. Dustin May was gassed. He threw 55 pitches on Friday, 18 pitches on Sunday, and he really wasn't anywhere near the plate for the most part when he started that appearance in Game 7. Julio Urias, 3 spectacular innings on Sunday. He only threw 39 pitches, though, so he might be okay coming back. But Blake Treinen threw 3 straight days, Friday to Sunday. Brusdar Graterol threw 3 out of 4. How healthy is Clayton Kershaw? How healthy is Walker Buehler? Walker Buehler was on the IL in the last week of the regular season. Came back. He didn't look great in Game 1, looked a lot better in Game 6. But, this Dodgers pitching staff, you wonder about them. After you likely get Kershaw in Game 1 and then Buehler in Game 2, then what do you get? Do you get a full start from Dustin May? Do you get Julio Urias? Do you want to save Urias as kind of that fireman type of role, the multi-inning relief role that he thrived in Game 7? I think there are a lot of questions here for the Dodgers with how they put together the pitching staff for this series. And I don't think those questions exist for the Rays. 2 full days off, that helps them align their starting rotation. I would expect we see Tyler Glasnow in Game 1, Blake Snell in Game 2, Charlie Morton in Game 3. And they also have the added benefit of a legit 4th starter in Ryan Yarbrough for Game 4. The Dodgers are going to have to sort of cobble a lot of things together. The Rays, I think they know exactly how they're going to wind up putting their lineup together here, or their rotation together here. So I think that's something that does benefit Tampa Bay a little bit in this series. And they're going to need it. They played elite level defense in the ALCS. They only batted .201, .296, .379 in that series. Houston batted .260, .350, .401. The Rays, of course, were up 3-0, could have finished it, went to Game 7, found a way to survive and advance. But Houston's offense was much better in that series than Tampa Bay's. So that's basically the crux of the argument here for this series. You've got the Rays pitching and defense against the Dodgers hitting and their depth of arms. Guys like Urias and May and Tony Gonsolin and Alex Wood, a guy that can contribute a little bit. Dylan Floro, possibly a guy that can contribute a little bit. So I think that you've got a really interesting series here because you've got pitching and defense predominantly against offense. And what do you favor here in this World Series format? Well, I guess that's the question that we have to answer here. One other thing that I think is pretty interesting about this series is that I think Kevin Cash is a much, much better manager than Dave Roberts. I think this could be a big advantage here for the Rays, that Kevin Cash, I think, gets it, and Dave Roberts, I think, really doesn't. I think Dave Roberts is a guy that struggles and could hurt the Dodgers at the margins in this series, depending on how he handles that bullpen. So that will be something worth watching here as we go along. Now, the Rays, second highest strikeout percentage in the regular season. The Dodgers, for all the great arms that they have, they actually weren't all that high in strikeout rate, in K per 9 with either the starters or the relievers. So I'll be curious to see how that dynamic plays out here, because I think back to the Mike Petrello tweet from before the season. Mike Petrello, of course, with MLB.com, MLB Advanced Media, and StatCast. And I cited this a lot coming into the season. Major League Baseball win percentage from 2015 through 2019, which is the period of StatCast. And of course, this year's StatCast going from Hawkeye to TrackMan, so things are a little bit different. But from 2015 through 2019, the team with the higher exit velocity in a game won 60.4% of the time. Team with more hard hit balls, batted balls of 95 plus miles per hour, won 71.5% of the time. The team with more barreled balls, 77.4% of the time, a winner. So when we look at these two teams here, in average exit velocity, Dodgers number 1 in baseball, 89.6 miles per hour. The Rays 10th at 88.6. Dodgers number 1 in 95 plus mile per hour batted balls with 697. Tampa Bay 17th with 534. Dodgers first in barrels with 164. Tampa Bay 9th with 117. So when you consider that, even though this is a small sample size of up to 7 games, it would appear that the Dodgers will have the higher exit velocity, will have more hard hit balls, will have more barrels. On the other hand, on the pitching side, how do things shake out there? Well, Tampa Bay pitching second in average exit velocity allowed at 86.8 miles per hour. Dodgers fourth at 87.2. In batted balls of 95 plus miles per hour allowed, the Dodgers were fourth at 487, Tampa Bay seventh at 514. But massive difference in offensive strength against. Remember, the regular season was all division games. The Rays faced the Yankees, who are always up at the top of the list in exit velocity. The Red Sox, who weren't a good team, but still have a lot of very capable and very good offensive pieces. And the Blue Jays, who of course have a lot of capable offensive bats as well. The Dodgers faced the Padres. And who else? You know, now we did have the interleague play as well, where the Rays faced a good Braves offense, good Nationals pieces. The Mets had a very good offense this year as well. It was kind of hidden by the fact that they didn't wind up with the results, but the Mets had a good offense. The Phillies, they have good offensive pieces. The Dodgers, sure, they faced Oakland and Houston in interleague play, but also the Rangers and the Mariners and the Angels, who were not good offensive teams. So the Rays did face much better offense than the Dodgers did during the regular season, and their pitching staff still held up pretty well. Dodgers only allowed 80 barrels. That was the fewest in baseball. The Rays allowed 100. That was fifth. But again, the Rays faced much better opposing offenses. So what do we do here? How do we package all of this information where, you know, to a degree, the Dodgers, their pitching staff is probably a little bit underrated coming into this series because they're going up against a Rays pitching staff that everybody really loves. And we know that the Dodgers have the better offense between these two teams. So plus 160, minus 200. Look, the Dodgers probably win this series. But I think at the big plus money number, with the fact that the Rays do have their rotation pretty much set up here, I think at plus 160, there's some value on the Rays. I think that the Dodgers probably win this series. Fangraphs puts the Dodgers at 67.6%. That implies about minus 209 on the line. So in that respect, you could argue that maybe the Dodgers price is a few cents cheaper. But I like how the Rays are set up here with their rotation. I think they're in far better shape in that regard because they've got their four guys lined up already. The Dodgers really don't. You know, it would be Kershaw in game one if the back allows it, Buehler in game two, and then, you know, who knows? Some combination of May and Gonsolin and Urias and some of the other guys that, you know, pitch bulk relief for them. The Rays, Glasnow, Snell, Morton, Yarbrough. If that's how they want to do it, they can set it up that way. They could use an opener for Yarbrough if they want to, because something that's kind of interesting here, and I talked about this going into the Braves series, is that the Dodgers were tied for first in weighted runs created plus against righties. They were eighth against lefties, and they were still 13% above league average, but they were 26% above league average against righties. So with the Rays here, you've got Blake Snell, you've got Ryan Yarbrough, you've got Josh Fleming. Is that enough? Will that be enough for the Rays to pull off this upset here? The roof was open for the NLCS, even on that real weird windy day. The extended forecast looks fine for the roof to be open. Again, this is not a great offensive ballpark, but the Dodgers at least have some experience playing here. The Rays do not. This was a brand new ballpark. So, you know, kind of outfield angles, sight lines, stuff like that, the feel of the mound. These are all things that maybe could help the Dodgers a little bit in game one. We'll kind of have to wait and see, you know, what that sort of looks like as everything plays out. But I also think that the big outfield, the fact that the ball doesn't carry super well, that benefits this Rays outfield defense, which is really, really good. So I think it's a hard series to handicap from a series price standpoint. Again, the Dodgers, clearly the better offense, will probably make the harder contact in this series, could very well put more balls in play than the Rays do. And also the Dodgers walking a lot more. You know, is that something that the Rays are able to suppress? Can they keep the Dodgers off the base paths with the walk? That could be the most important attribute and element of this series, most important characteristic of this series, because we know that the Rays have to win in low-scoring environments. The Dodgers are plenty capable of winning in high-scoring environments with their offense. So I think there are a lot of questions here about this series. This could be a series won at the margins. I think the biggest thing about this series is that it probably goes long. So I think, over under 5.5 games, something like that, may be a pretty good bet here. I do think this is a lengthy series because you've got a Rays bullpen that, if they get leads, will be very likely to protect it. So I think we're in line for a great World Series. And you've got all the different storylines that you want. You've got the smart, savvy, low-budget organization against the smart, blank checkbook organization. You've got hitting versus pitching. You've got a very good elite manager in Kevin Cash against an average to below average manager in Dave Roberts. A lot of storylines to look at here for this series. And again, like I said, from a series price standpoint, I don't think I love either side of this. I think that at plus 160, you can make an argument for the Rays. I think they are probably a better team than people realize. But this Dodgers offense is very scary. And the Rays, if they don't pitch well, will be up against it. The margin for error for Tampa Bay in this series, I think, is pretty small. So, if you don't want to take on that risk, then you either take the Dodgers or you find a more creative way to play this series. I won't have a series price. Kudos to anybody that has the Rays from before the season. If you do, you've got some decisions to make here on how you want to hedge. If the Dodgers win game one, hedging becomes very difficult. If the Rays win game one, well, you either let it ride or you get, a pretty decent price on the Dodgers. So that's kind of a tough question that you have to answer here as you go throughout. But from a game-by-game standpoint, like I said, I think you probably look for a little bit lower scoring of an environment. The Rays are not a good offensive team. They're fine. They're not on the Dodgers level. They're not walking as much as they did in the regular season. So that's a bit concerning to me. They do strike out a lot. So I think you probably look for a lower scoring environment. And if you get lower scoring, that does benefit the Rays. So again, I think that there are cases you can make on both sides here of this series. I don't really have a well-defined series price, but I do want to see how things start to play out here. And again, I do wonder about how the Dodgers are going to set up their rotation for the middle games here of this series. Like I said, if we have a game 7, I'll talk about it next Monday on the show. If we don't, then I'll just simply focus on a recap of the baseball season. I'll do that either way, talk about what these 60 games mean to me. Again, talk about, some of the philosophical differences I'll make going into the 2021 season. But for now, let's just enjoy the World Series, because you know what? A few months ago, it didn't look like we were going to get to this point. The playoff bubbles have worked. No new positive cases for Major League Baseball in over 50 days. So let's just enjoy this World Series and see what it brings between the Rays and the Dodgers. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I'll talk with Brian Blessing about Week 7 of the NFL on tomorrow's show. And remember that you will never strike out when you're in the Bettor's Box.